critical, and I think the fact that the whole revitalization is happening and the questions around people being able to come back in the ways that it was promised that it would be able to happen. So those are the big sort of concerns right now for community.
And also in terms of risk, I forgot which one of you was talking about it, but you said that, oh, no, my mom doesn't understand because, I have to take risks, my mom doesn't. And in regards to some of the risks, like what's your opinion on that? Because I know, I can identify what you're talking about, when you're going through certain pressures, and like your parents, they're very, sometimes, they think, I don't want to do anything to risk my position because I have to be responsible for myself and my family. And then the youth, themselves being fed up with their situations, like, no, this is what I'm going to do because I don't like this. So in terms of the risk, what's your take on that?
I don't mess with guys from Region, or I don't mess with these guys from Malvern, I don't mess with, but why is that? A lot of times there really isn't a good reason for that. It is what it is, and it's always been that way, so that's how it's going to maintain, and that's how it's going to remain. So for a lot of them, there is a concern for their safety, and moving through the community, moving through when they step outside of the community, that's also a challenge for them. So it is a reality.
We have another question or comment over here.
Hi, my name is Ryan Edwards, youth member at Friends in Trouble. My question is just, after this documentary, I know it was a little private project that y'all did, but I'm curious, if the media was to get a hold of this, do you think it might have a negative impact later down in the run? Because we know how the media likes to twist and bend things in their own little way. So do you personally feel that this will have some type of negative impact later down in the future if the media was to get a hold of this documentary?
That's a good question. I think the fact that there is a certain level of ownership to it, that there are certain people in place that won't allow for that to happen. But yeah, the attempt might be there, but it's the response to that attempt, right? So, like jane-finch, Regent Park is a community that is very resilient, right? And when there's crisis, people tend to, it's like a family, right? So you can talk bad about, I can talk bad about my brother or sister, but that's not for you, right? And I think there is that sort of protective element, and I think that's why it was so important. And the director, Hubert, in going through this process for this, the film to be shown in Regent Park first, before it goes anywhere else, right? Because they have ownership for it, because Regent Park allowed for this to happen, right? They were part of the creation of it. So they have ownership for it now, so I don't think, there may be attempts, but I don't think it will be something that we need to really worry about.
Okay. Before the next question, I just want to inform you that soon we'll be doing a draw, and Tika's collecting the ways to participate forms. If you haven't already given one, could you just prepare it and put your hand up with the form, and then someone will collect it. There's another question.
Hi, my name is Paula. I'm a grade 7 teacher at a school in Rexdale. I had two questions in regards to the film. One of them was when they found, was it Kendall that was charged with throwing the bottle, and then at the end, all he had to do was write an apology letter. So I said to myself, well, why didn't he do that in the beginning? So this whole issue of criminalization are black youth. And then the other issue was when it was Mikey in the guidance office. He didn't even question what the guidance counselor said to him. So as a teacher, I'm teaching my kids how to advocate for themselves. If there was another student in there, would they not have, might have said, well, why? Why can't I? So these are just questions that came up as I was watching the film.
I've spoken to Lola about this earlier, but how do you feel with getting programs out there at a young age rather than waiting until students are like grade 11, grade 12? That's the first question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, you should start in kindergarten. Honestly, if you look at some of the data, and some of the researchers that are in this room can speak to that, in terms of when a child actually checks out, it's long before they reach high school, right? There's a lot of things that happen in the early years that impact the later years. So I think, yeah, absolutely, there should be greater focus on the primary and junior kids in terms of trying to provide the appropriate supports.
Okay, and my second question was, it was obvious that you don't live in Regent Park anymore, but if you could explain how you went through the struggle and how you got out, and also if there's any feedback from those students that you work with on how, like, if there's any, I guess, misunderstandings or anything with you not living in the area, but you're still helping them, kind of thing? Yeah,
so I've always been in Regent, so I was very fortunate. I was a big sports kid, and I went away on scholarship when I was 18. And never really lived in a community since then, right? But I'd come home in the summers, I'd work at the community center. My friends were still there, still hung out there. The guys around the block that at the time were making a lot of money, and I was making no money, they sort of looked out for me and said, no, this is not for you, right? And I think there needs to be a little bit more, for me personally, it's not for me to judge about what you are doing or how you get. I don't know your struggle, you understand? So I'm not going to judge you for what you do or how you choose to make a living. The same way someone shouldn't necessarily do that to me, right? But I think there is a certain level of responsibility when you step into that side of lifestyle, right? And certain people look out for me when I was coming up, right? I had adults that really took time to get to know me and realize that I had certain talents and wanted to make sure that I stayed away from a lot of negative things. Now, was I perfect? Far from it. But what happens is that the more exposure you have to some of the positive things, the easier it is to become that positive person, right? And I talk to a lot of my students because at the end of the day, the thing that always comes up is respect. Well, you know, I don't want to be a punk. And Mikey talked about that. Why did he go, you know, with his boys to go steal his car? Because he didn't want to look like a punk, right? And I'm like, really? So what does that really look like? You know what I mean? And why would they want you to be in that space, right? Well, I don't want to be a nerd, sir. I said, really? You know that nerds are employed, right? Can you show me a nerd that doesn't have a job, right? But I can show you a lot of cool guys that don't have a job, right? And I used to tell them, listen, they may have more money than I do, but I have credit, right? So there's a lot of dudes that have money but can't move it. And you have to know the language of the street and understand how to communicate with them on that level. It's not necessarily about all of the academics and all these sort of things. That, yes, it's important, but you have to be able to break it down on a level that's real to them and reaching them where they're at. I was talking to Alex about this earlier. You know, in the beginning when I was doing this project, I used to apologize about making this being another documentary of young black boys from the inner city. And then I stopped apologizing about that. Why? Because when they're writing grants, right, they take that guy on the block with the 9 in his waist, and that's the model for the programming that they tend to want to curb, you know, steer these children from. But 9 times out of 10, that money never reaches that kid on the block, because they're not walking into your organization to get the education that you're providing, right? So I think it's important for them to understand those people, but create programs that go out into the community. That's not, you know, working between the 9 to 5 schedule, because they don't work on that clock. You need to be there at 3 a.m., right? So I think there's many different layers and levels to that, and not everyone, I think everyone has a role to play in that. Not everyone can be front line, right? Someone has to be management, right? But like a team sport, right? The guy that sinks, or the person that sinks the winning shot is just as important as the person that sets the pick, or this person that makes the block. But you have to know that and instill that in the person that is doing those things, right? So.